Well, first, I just want to say thanks, for letting us interview you. Thanks, for myself and on behalf of Progulator.com. We reviewed the latest Psychedelic Ensemble album, um, The
Yes.
Tale of the Golden King, fairly recently, and we absolutely loved it. Myself, my collaborators, and such. So, for all the listeners out
Oh,
there, this is TPE with us tonight. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Matt, and thank you for having me. And thank you for the wonderful review, too.
Oh yeah, no problem. I mean, great music, deserves a great review. So no problem at
Thank
all.
you.
So let's talk a little bit about the new album. One thing that I noticed in your last interview that you said was that out of the albums you've made over the last 30 years, this was one of the most fun to make. Do you mind elaborating
It,
on that a little bit?
it was a blast. I mean, I began working with Ann Karen, who I enlisted to do this album, and she was a blast to work with. And also the orchestra. I mean, just I've done so many records in the classical genre with classical musicians, and I've done records in prog and rock and so forth. But this time it all came together, so it was very, very cool, to mix classical stuff with the prog stuff as well, and to bring the prog musicians into the classical world, and vice versa. So it was very, very cool.
So for the for the orchestra, they were in there for the first time, obviously with this record. What was how would I say this? Bringing them in, I would assume most of them probably hadn't worked in Prague before. Am I correct in assuming this?
Actually, some of them have. You'd be
Oh,
surprised. Well, not really prog. I shouldn't say
sure,
prog, but
sure.
in rock music and popular music.
Okay,
A lot of them do session work in New York, and have done session work all over the country. And so yeah, they've some of them have done lots of playing. One of the guys has played with Rod Stewart and the whole Led Zeppelin, and lots of rock bands and so
gotcha.
forth. So yeah, and they love it. They think it's really cool. I mean, it's not something they turn their nose up at. They really respect progressive rock. They see that as being very much connected to what they do in classical music because of the complexities and so forth.
Very
So
good.
they were all they were very supportive and very meticulous about what they did, and had lots of questions, and it was really spectacular.
Oh, very good. So, did any
Yeah.
surprises come up during the orchestra sessions, either in terms of you know um, ideas coming in that ended up getting shifted around or changed it, instrumentation changes, or even just additional
Yeah.
creativity?
Yeah, we would do some things, where we would lay down, say, strings for something, and then I would come in and, say, let's, go back and double it or something like that to get a fuller sound. Or I had initially included a clarinet and ended up kiboshing the clarinetist. Not because of her playing, actually, but
Sure.
I just didn't like the sound, and I decided to use an oboe instead, and things like that. But there weren't, if you do your work right at home, as it were, or in my own studio as I'm scoring, you shouldn't have any surprises. You should be able to hear it in your head and make it come off the page,
Sure.
when you're doing the sessions. So, there weren't really, there were some pleasant surprises in a way that things sounded fuller and richer than I might have expected, and things like that, because the playing was so good. We went around and handpicked, just sort of said, let's get that guy and let's get this gal, and, so forth, and really got the best people in town. So the playing was so good, I thought, that, it was sort of a pleasant surprise when it all came together and they were all playing and it was all there. It was really fantastic, so.
Very
Because
nice.
you never really know about orchestral things, because players can come in and they're sort of not in the right mood or don't really care and that kind of thing, and it can come off and be a little sloppy, or something, and what you get is what you get. There's you've got time constraints and things like that,
Right.
and with so many people involved, So in this case, it was just spectacular. I mean, people came really prepared and had looked over their parts, and just sat in and did their thing and did it to the best of their ability. So it was really fantastic.
Very nice. Very nice. So,
Yeah.
did you, in terms of this album compared to past albums, I mean, I hear that it's still very distinctively, in your style, a lot more epic, with the added orchestra and all. Maybe you could describe, what did you do differently this times around in terms of musical decisions, and not necessarily, obviously including orchestras, a big thing, but not necessarily just the fact of including the orchestra. Was there any thoughts or differences in terms of the way you approached the music this time around?
I think in this one, the Tale of the Golden King, that is, I approached it almost more like an opera than just a concept album.
Sure.
And certain tracks, especially the first 2 or 3,
right.
There's a lot of dialogue, between the characters, as it were, in the concept. And so it kind of comes off more like opera or something. But in the liner notes, I call it a progressive rock drama, because it's not really opera, but it's somewhere between concept and opera, I would say. So that's a bit different, than the last 3.
For sure. Very good.
Yeah.
And in terms of, obviously you're, very influenced by, classical music. Was there any, any particular classical influences that you saw coming more into the music this time around because of the fact that you were working with the orchestra?
I wouldn't say there's one particular, composer or something that really had an influence on it. I would say that the prog music, how to put it, the prog music really kind of influenced the way I thought about the orchestra.
Sure.
More than thinking about, say, Stravinsky or someone like that, or, Mozart or something.
Yeah.
I kind of sort of wrote the prog stuff first and then sort of scored around that. So that was really the driving force behind how I thought about orchestration and scoring techniques and so forth. Very
good. Very good. Now, what I would be kind of curious to hear a little bit about is maybe a little bit of a musical analysis, of a track. Obviously, it being, a big piece in and of itself, the entire album, with a lot of motifs that are reoccurring and being developed throughout the course of the album. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a tour, on what are, in your mind, some of the main themes and what you do with them across, several tracks. If that's too, I don't know, maybe if that's too much to ask. If not, maybe you could focus on one track, say maybe the finale or something, and kind of give us a little bit of musical analysis.
Well, oddly enough, I'll start with the finale. The finale begins with this big orchestral intro, and it really is a kind of summary of all the themes of the album. If you know the album, the Queen of Sorrows theme comes back, and various other songs. The primary material returns, so it's kind of a medley, as it were, of the entire album. And right at the outset, there's a little tune that's played, with the recorder and so forth as the orchestra begins. And that really is a primary theme. And you'll hear that same theme, for example, very clearly played on nylon string guitar at the beginning of The Queen of Sorrow. Mm-hmm. But now, rather than just, a monophonic tune, it's harmonized, of course, with guitar chords and so forth. But these themes do keep recurring. And, there are little subtle things, like I use someone with a really terrific falsetto. And
right.
Anytime the idea of death comes up, you hear this very high, almost scream, that mm-hmm. recurs throughout the album. So, there are things like that. But, basically, there are a number of themes. and they're just sort of transformed throughout the entire album. Trying to think, Make a Plan, which is one of my favorite songs on the album.
Uh-huh.
That whole opening, the acoustic opening, is really just a derivative of primary themes you've heard before. So it's very tightly composed, and
Right.
worked out.
Very good, very good. Now I think,
Yeah.
do I remember from your other interview, you saying that Captive Days was your favorite track on the album? Am I remembering right?
Yeah, it is actually.
Can you explain a
but
little bit?
it's like, yeah, I have to say though, it's a bit like when people say, what's your favorite Beatles tune?
Sure,
and today it's
sure.
Fool on the Hill, and tomorrow it's a life in a day in the life or something.
Yeah, of course.
So it's always kind of changing. But that particular little, it's not really a song because it doesn't have lyrics and so forth. But that little piece kind of came late, and I said in another interview it was a late bloomer. I had been looking for a link between the Golden King and the Queen of Sorrow, and I had to find some kind of little transition between them. And that music, that particular piece, just came to me one day, and it took literally like a day to write, and then a few days to perform it. But I don't know. There's just something about it that's kind of very haunting to me. A little piano ostinato that persists throughout the piece, and the sound of that piano that's modified using some various techniques just keeps recurring, and it's a very haunting little piece. And I don't know. It just entertains me, as it were. So yeah.
Now, you've got a great concept going on for